Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready for the Wot Supp podcast. We're talking all things supplements with insiders, athletes, experts, and more. So sit back, relax, and prepare to find out what's up.
Okay, guys, welcome to the Wot Supp podcast, episode 12 now, with none other than Matt Highgate, our wonderful co-host, and Izhar, owner of EHP Labs, one of the biggest brands in the world. Matt, why don't you give us a rundown on our wonderful guest that we have on tonight, mate?
Man, what can I say? He's stayed rather in the shadows, hasn't he? So he's let the brand and the team speak for itself, and that's something I admire about him. He doesn't get all the accolades. He sends it over to the team. So I know a fair bit about Izhar, and this is why we're honoured to have him on the podcast to share his story. So welcome to the podcast, Izhar.
Guys, really appreciate you guys having me on.
Well, beautiful. Well, I think you've we really appreciate having you on, because I think of all people, you've possibly got some of the most valuable possible information to give our listeners, because I suppose a lot of our audience are business owners, they're retail store owners, they're brand owners, they're formulators, they're essentially in the business space. They're young up and coming entrepreneurs, people who want to get into the fitness industry and the supplement industry. And of course, I guess one of the recurring themes and things that we always try and ask guests like yourself who have built empires based around this is I guess this common theme of how to build value from your brand for a customer. Because it seems a lot of people in building brands, that seems to be the same, the core message in building a business. You need to offer something of value to your customer, and you've built a mega brand. You've built an absolute behemoth. So what are the ways that when you set out to create EHP, was that in the forefront of your mind? How did that originate for you to get that what you've built now?
Yeah, thanks for asking, man. Look, I think that's gonna send us down a big, deep rabbit hole. Once I get started on this topic, because to truly understand what value you want to add to somebody else, you need to understand what your core values are as a person and what you stand for, what you believe in. That stuff has to run through you at a visceral core level, right? You can't get out there and try and expect to add value to somebody else if you don't instill those values yourself. So that was core fundamental belief for me. To give you some background, look, I'm from a small sunny island country called Fiji, man. My family came to Australia when I was 5 years old in 1988, during the time of the Fijian military coup. So I am the migrant story, the stereotypical migrant story, dude. Like, I came to this country at the age of 5, no fucking front teeth, man. Like, I was just like that kid getting into trouble, falling over all the time, smashed out all my front teeth. I had no teeth from the age of 5 to the age of 8. Just came in, man, loved everything about Australia. Like, this was a land of opportunity for me. I was like that super excited kid always. My family fled political and racial persecution in Fiji because I have Indo-Fijian heritage. And my dad's heritage extends back to the South Indian sugarcane farming slaves that were taken over to Fiji to work as slaves under the indenture system on the promise that one day they'd get land. So this is going back about 250, 300 years ago. And when my family moved to Australia, it was because essentially there was some political uprising happening in Fiji, and we fled to the land of opportunity, and education was first and foremost. I grew up in Australia, saw my parents working 2 jobs each, man. My sister raised me. Like, she was 5 years older than me. She used to cook. She used to cook for me. She used to set me chores. I was 5 years old. She'd be like, "Izhar, you got to go clean the bathrooms, man, before you get your dinner."
She set you discipline at a young age, man.
It's instilled from an early age, and that work ethic, and seeing other people that you love truly sacrifice to give you a better opportunity. So, cutting the long story short, man, I could talk about this almost for an hour separately. The background story, not many people know it. Matt knows it in some detail. We've caught up at my office, and it's probably the first time you heard that, right? Like, I don't share this stuff very often. I've been pretty private my entire life, and the company's been first and foremost everything that we put forward. But for me, it comes from the core fundamentals, come from what you really believe in, sacrificing, ensuring that people around you are uplifted because you rise by lifting others. So anyway, I followed the immigrant dream, man, and made my parents proud. I became a lawyer, which is for every ethnic family is the dream for their son to become a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer, or a dentist. I became a lawyer. I did want to become a doctor because my dad had a massive heart attack when I was in grade 9 and like died for 10 minutes and then came back. And I wanted to, become a cardiothoracic surgeon. Studied hard, man. I was a bit of a brat kid, but I turned good.
Mate, I've got a friend that went to your same year, and he swears that you were the smartest kid in the school, and you were a hustler. Jason, you know him.
I know Jason real.
Yeah. He's very successful now as well, but he speaks so highly of you.
Nah, thank you. Look, it's I mean, I'm blushing if you can see. Look, it's really nice of him to say that, man. Look, I worked hard. Like I wouldn't say I think my biggest gift was the fact that I wasn't gifted at anything. That's my biggest gift, and nothing came to me easy. But yeah, kind of long story short, man, I got into law school, and I practiced law for 5 years. And I think the turning point was when we went to Fiji when I was in grade 10, and I was there with our relatives that live in the farming region, and these are the old school relatives that talk about their great grandparents being bestowed land after years of slavery, and now how native title, land acts, and all this stuff, and their land were being stripped off them, and they said, "Hey, you're going to be a lawyer one day and come and help our family get our land back." So I think that must have been something inside me that drove me to become a lawyer, man. And then anyway, finished university. I studied hard. I still value education. I know a lot of entrepreneurs out there talk about education being overrated and it not being something that has a lot of value. For me, it has incredible value because it's taught me discipline and given me everything I have today, man. So I became a lawyer. Worked my butt off. I was youngest senior associate in Australian corporate law history at the age of 26. Just optimal timing. There's global financial crisis. Everyone around me was getting fired. I got promoted to senior associate, and what that meant was I was working 18-hour days, and I got diagnosed with autoimmune disease that was stress-induced called Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. So look, I was 115 kilo, I'm 6'4", 115 kilo amateur bodybuilder, like before Instagram days, before people wearing stringers on IG, flexing and posing in front of mirrors. I did it because it gave me discipline. I was always a naturally bigger boy. I played prop forward in rugby league, and always a bit of a bigger boy. Like if I didn't exercise and play sports and get a gym and lift weights, like I'd get big. So kept me lean. Anyway, I got sick, so I took some time off. Spent about a year in hospital. And this is a turning point in my life. And you talked about value. What value do you want to add your customers? I think you need to go through something. And this is truly when you want to build more than a company, more than revenue, more than profitability, more than bullshit material items, where you truly want to impact other people's lives. It's when you've had a life-changing event yourself. And for me, that was one, seeing my dad have the massive heart attack when I was in grade 9. I was 14 years old, man. That put my basketball career to end. Like I was playing rep basketball for Parramatta Wildcats. I wanted to be the next Michael Jordan. That went to shit, man. So, and then the next thing was me getting diagnosed with my autoimmune disease. And Matt knows the story. Spent a bit of time in hospital. I wanted to dedicate my life to helping other people prevent disease, avoid disease, because it's much better to prevent than to try and cure. And that's my love for nutrition, sports nutrition, and lifting, bodybuilding.
That's how you delved into studying like supplementation, right?
Yeah, man, it's self-taught, dude. So because I was sick myself, I started to get very much into what's more. It was before I actually got sick. So, there's the cool buzzword now, biohacking. Everyone uses biohacking.
Yeah.
I was taking Bacopa Monieri, Brahmi, back when I was in year 11, man. Like back when I was like 16, 17 years old, for like memory enhancement.
Awesome.
And focus, back when I was in school.
Brahmi's
and so yeah, dude. And so like even when I was younger and I was lifting and stuff, I was always looking for the edge, always looking to be better. Like how could I be better than myself?
How did you think to do something like that? No one's thinking like that at year 11 back then as well. Thinking about biohacking and nootropics and focus, it wasn't as popular back then as it is now.
Look, dude, really good question, man. It's because I think I alluded to it earlier on. When you're not good at anything naturally and you just got to work your butt off and you got to work, you're looking for every freaking hack there is. You're looking for every little, thing that's gonna give you the edge. For, compared to people that are naturally gifted at things. So I think that was my real kind of driving force and motivation. And yeah, dude, like long story short, man, I think that, all those fundamentals, starting off, getting sick, leaving the law, setting up a retail store in Randwick, and that was the birthplace, man. That was the conception of the whole principles behind what EHP would eventually become 7.5 years later. And we're incredibly honored and proud and humbled to still retain the same values that we had from day one, which is build a community, understand what those communities' needs are, get out there, over-service, over-deliver, uplift people, and essentially seek to empower people by arming and empowering people with the knowledge, the confidence, the tools to get out there and make the right decision. Because at the end of the day, it goes back to the whole parable of teach a man to fish and he'll eat for a lifetime. Give a man a fish and he'll just eat for that one day. So we're more premised around empowering people, and I think that's been one of the fundamental principles that's really been a driving force behind building our brand to what it is today. Is that everyone thinks that we've got popularity and fame and we have a global acclamation because of our athletes and our marketing. I'll tell you right now, with the utmost humility, maybe in the early days that got us our awareness. Today, our number one form of marketing is our customers. Our customers who get results, people see them get results. And because they're so impressed based on the quality of what we have to deliver, our products, the fact we care, we have the best customer service in the world, 24/7, 365 days a year. Doesn't matter, it's Christmas, it's Eid, it's Hanukkah, we still deliver service. And you have to be obsessed and dedicated to do that. And it's relentless. Like, you can't stop, dude. It's not just a job.
It's crazy to see every single year your brand just fucking grows, bro. It just grows. It just grows and grows and grows. How do you, like, that probably comes back to what you're saying and your core values or everything. Do you ever just pinch yourself sometimes and go, holy shit, look at this? The team that you have. I've been at your HQ, man. It's like a bloody Google office. Insane.
Thank you, man. Like, that's our fifth office in 7 years. We bought the building in the city, opposite the House Museum, whatever. We invested a lot of resources into making it what it is today, and that's our, my leadership team's personal investment into all of our team. There's 110 people in the company. They're in, some of them in different countries. There's slightly over 70 in the Sydney office.
Wow.
All great people, man. Shout out to your team.
It's an impressive operation. I think an interesting theme, though, that I didn't expect to touch on this early in the piece, but I think when you mentioned Crohn's and autoimmune diseases, stress management in particular is something that's very interesting to me in recent times, because I think the impact of being sort of the byproduct, I should say, of being someone who's a very, like you said, relentless, borderline obsessive. I think a lot of us are in this game, because you have to be, right, to build a business and give it the love and attention it needs to grow into something. You have to be obsessed, and with that comes the long days. That comes the lack of
early
sleep.
mornings, late nights.
Yeah, early mornings, late nights, right? And with that comes the stress. And I think it's a really under talked about area, because people all talk about the overnight successes that take 10 years to happen, and they ignore that part of how much of a toll this puts on people. And I guess you ended up in a hospital bed with Crohn's, which is very much an autoimmune disease, very related to chronic cortisol exposure, which usually also leads to some sort of gut inflammation through zonulin. So it's a really interesting, really interesting for you to raise that actually there. And I think it might be worth you've mentioned now. Obviously, you would have spent a lot of time reading into post that, I would imagine, how to manage the stresses. And now your company's much bigger than I'm assuming you were. Your workload's probably more than it was as a lawyer. How do you conduct yourself now? Because a lot of our listeners would probably value, how does someone who runs a 7-figure business conduct himself in a way that prevents him getting back to that hospital bed, and with a much more enlightened outlook now.
Look, I appreciate all that, man. It's there's no rules. I think the thing for me is I'm constantly in denial, and you almost have to be. What they say is they say being oblivious, being naive is bliss sometimes, and I don't think I'm that in tune with my body. I think why my mental strength is trumps my physiological strength, natural ability, just how strong and obsessive and driven I can be, and everything else gets shut out and blocked out. And there's always a cost. Like, life is binary, you know that, right? There's going to be 1, and then there's -1, and 1 plus -1 doesn't always equal 0. right? Like it's not as simple as math. It's not a zero-sum game all the time. Sometimes it's collateral damage. And with me, I've ignored my body and I've neglected my body for a long time, which really was that real driving force of that self-awareness piece. And when I became self-aware, truly, when I was on my ass, on my back in hospital, on the hospital bed, dude, that wasn't fun. And I never want to get back there, especially now. Got 2 little girls, you know, wife, my family. You know, we've got kids in Fiji at the orphanage that we look after. You know, there's a whole bunch of things that we do that people are dependent on me, and it's all up to God. But whatever I can do to ensure that my time here on this earth, privilege that I have here, is prolonged. It's great. Look, for me, a lot of people meditate. I'm Muslim, so I pray. I wake up at 4:30 in the morning. We just had Ramadan. I fasted. It was the most beautiful, holy, cleansing month that you can imagine. Whatever stresses for the entire year just all got eradicated, all got washed away.
Presses the reset button, I've been told.
100%, man. It's everything, you know, everything in terms of just, man, whatever stresses and pressure you have, you know, in terms of your people who have thyroid issues and, you know,
would you say it's a cleanse for you?
Issues and things like that. Absolutely, man. It's mind, body, soul, spiritual cleansing, everything. To a point where you can be so spiritually in tune with who you are and what drives you and your level of zen. It's incredible. Everything clears up. Your face, you know, I think Michael Mosley's been a big advocate of it. So when it's not Ramadan in Islam, they say you should fast 2 days a week, Monday and Thursday, 5-2 diet to restrict caloric intake. But also to help them manage leptin and ghrelin levels, which is obviously your hormones that control satiety and appetite. And it's been super cool for me because I've got a huge, my appetite's monstrous. Like I could sit there, I could be that dude in this eating competition. I think it's enough of all those Fijian feasts growing up, and I grew up in a predominantly Lebanese area in Auburn, in the hood of Sydney.
Proper Basel, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah, the hood is cool, and so I think just growing up and delving and feasting and stuff like that, yeah, you definitely have love and passion for food. But for me, it brings it back to family. It brings it back to your core values. I don't follow rituals. Like, I'm not that dude. I know a lot of people do profess it, and it works for a lot of people. You know, they profess and pontificate about rituals and waking up at a certain time, meditating and routine. And I have no routine, dude. Like, there's no magic formula. I'm constantly chasing my tail. Nothing's perfect. You know, this year, this is going to be our first year where we hit the 100 mil revenue mark. We're a 9-figure company in revenue this year, globally. As Maddie said, we doubled last year's 50. So for us to strap ourselves in for blockbuster year this year is pretty epic. We're super proud of that, man.
That's insane to double revenue, particularly with the climate that we've had in recent times. And again, harping it back to our a lot of our audience bases being the people that we, being the younger versions of ourselves that have, who want to start things, who want to build things, and want more for themselves and want to really strive. Yeah. Some of that's getting advice from someone like yourself who's managed to double revenue after 7 years in business already. Like, where does that come from? Because you've got long established products. You guys have been in the game for a long time. You've got an established image. Usually, doubling revenue is seen in maybe companies who are startups, or maybe 2-3 years on after that sort of establishment phase, but not in mature companies with mature products. And so what do you attribute that like a doubling of revenue of an already big company is almost unheard of? What do you attribute that to, and what would you recommend? Yeah, how did that happen?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. And a lot of things you said like that, reminds me of me growing up and listening to my dad. Who grew up in a very conservative upbringing. He got his first pair of shoes when he was 18 years old. Shoes before that, very humble beginnings. And Dad would always say to me, "Stop being in such a rush," because he goes, when you're a baby, when you're a toddler, you went straight from your mom holding you in her arm, so she put you down one day, and you went straight to running. You skipped the crawling stage. And the way I look at it is, And this was me. Look, I'm a little bit older and a little bit more mature now. Okay, we've been running the business for 7.5, 8 years. I started it when I was 28, 29. I'm 30, 36 now. So I've got a little bit more maturity and foresight. But I am one impatient motherfucker, man. Like, for me, it's a blessing and a curse at the same time. I feel that people that put up barriers and limits and say, it's possible in the early stages, and when you start to become mature, it's not. Well, to me, it always seems impossible until it's done. The famous Nelson Mandela quote, and I like to look at things as though we did it. Like if we can go in our first year, I remember in our first year, man, like we're so fortunate the way we did things. We entered the market at the right time. We created a killer product. 1,3-dimethylmelamine just got banned. We were one of the first pioneers in the space to be doing in the fitness industry as pioneers to be doing influencer marketing. Back when we were being laughed at as a brand, look at those guys marketing on Instagram, or they were Instagram brand. Dude, we just did that shit because we had no money, and we wanted to create awareness of our brand. And yeah, it was at a stage where no one else was doing it.
You're the pioneers of the space back then, right? I'd say.
One of them, dude. But it's not like we knew that shit. It's not like the word influencer wasn't even created.
So accidental pioneer.
Kind of, but it started working. So we started ramping and scaling. I remember going from first year 3 mil to 6 mil to 15 mil. When we hit 15 mil, this is in year 2, year 3, and we were like we went from having one little table at the Olympia. They're coming in as a sponsor.
This was in 2014 from memory, just for our viewers, right?
Yeah. 2014 was a sponsor of the Olympia, man. Yeah. And the year before that we just started. And the year before that we had a little table as a booth. And so you said 2014, fast forward 4 years, and we're the partners with the brand partner, the brand sponsor Arnold. I got my parents on stage. My mum's a big fan of Rolly Winkler. My mum put in the first medal on Rolly when he was the Arnold. And Angelica Tahira won first place bikini, and my dad's putting the medal on her. And I'm a big family guy, man. So I put my parents up there to give out the medals and the trophies, and so getting up there with me and my wife, we just sat back clapping with the team. My old man Denzel, my mum, who I love, man, to bits. Yeah, she was up there enjoying it. She wouldn't let Arnold's hand go. She like locked him in and I wouldn't let him get off the stage. But bro, like, look, at the end of the day, it's very, very simple. You cannot be a product of the environment that other people create. You create your own fucking environment, man. You know what I'm saying? So if you want to, if you want to get out there and your goal is to go next year from $1 to $10, that's 10xing. Don't fucking do it. Reverse engineer it. Work out what ways. So last year when we were at say 50 mil annual rev, and this financial year we'll finish off on 9 figures. Touch with God, inshallah, God's will. But I reverse engineer that shit. Where are we going to get this next 50 mil from? You break it down and you start looking at markets, and you break down different markets. You start productizing, you start rolling out different products. You can say, okay, cool. The brand has a level of maturity, and there's certain products that are well recognized. Well, how do you continue to innovate and iterate those brands, those products, to the point where OxyShred was the #1 thermogenic back within the first year and a half of us rolling
it still is the #1 thermogenic. It still is. In Australia.
But why? Why? It's because we keep on reminding everyone, keep on delivering to everyone, keep on exciting. There's 4 new limited edition drops every year. The hardcore rolled out, non-stim rolled out. We're doing collabs with shit. So to answer your question in short, if anyone's listening to this podcast, my advice to them is, man, you play your own game and you set your own rules. And if you are okay with growing 10%, 20%, if you're okay with not growing, I have a friend that owns a law firm, and he said to me, I don't want to grow. I'm happy with my life. Oh, fucking awesome. I'm so happy for you, man. And so, yeah, man, muzzle tough to him. And so, like, for me, I'm not that dude. Like, it doesn't matter what number we're doing now. You could say we do $1 billion. I'm still looking at what we're going to do next year.
It seems to me that you're looking at the what you do as more of a score and reaching more people than you're seeing as, hey, I'm rich, I'm going to go buy a Rolls Royce or a Rolex or whatever the hell. It doesn't seem to me, you don't come off as that type of person.
So Simon Sinek, the guy that wrote the why, start with why, he
Yes.
talked about the shit like hammering us millennials for us being lazy and eating avocado on toast and shit. That guy, yeah, I have a lot of respect for him. I do have a lot of respect for him. And he's very cool. He's awesome. I like the shit that he rolls out, looks at things like motivation, and the word motivation, people don't understand. You have to have a motive to have motivation. So what's your motive? What's your why? All that shit. I don't necessarily waste too much time doing that. I just get on with it. And then 7 years later, 10 years later, think, well, what was my why back then? Don't have time to think about that stuff, but it must exist deep down inside here. He said one very interesting thing that I listened to one time, and he was explaining his theory that it's called the infinite game. Life is an infinite game. It's not a short game. You can't say I'm winning because it's not a game. There's no start and stop. It's an infinite game. You need to play for the long run. So for me to continue my infinite game, I'm not looking at what we're finishing on this year. Like as soon as I'm looking at this period as a finite period, it then becomes infinite because I'm looking at what we're going to do next year. I'm looking at what we're doing tomorrow. I've got the next 26 months planned out for NPD, for new product development launches. There's 58 new products rolling out.
Jesus.
Yeah. You have to have a level of passion and intensity and desire to get out there and trump yourself, man. Don't trump the competition. Me yesterday was our competition. EHP last year was our fucking competition.
That's the best, and that is the absolute take-home message, I think, isn't it? I think staying in your own lane, and allowing yourself to set the benchmark. I think that's pretty good, because I think if you allow your like when you kept bringing it back to where you said, "What's your why?" Motive is the fundamental of motivation, right? And if your motive is just to keep up with the Joneses or go see what other people are doing and try and match or beat that, you won't last. You won't have the endurance because the fuel is wrong. Like you won't, when you've got those, when you've got those late nights and early mornings, you haven't got the right why. So you won't last the distance because you can't unless you've got a very genuine reason, which goes back to that initial thing you said. Unless the actual core values are there, it's not going to work. And so I think the only genuine competitor that you're allowed to probably set your bar against is yourself, lest you find yourself in a pretty disingenuous race, right? But I also like the message though that you said about your friend who owns the law firm, and that he likes he loves life how it is, and that also should be the goal, right? At some point, like if the goal is to be is to love your life and be happy in yourself, be successful in your own eyes, then to a lot of people that won't necessarily mean exponential growth year on year. But that's also worthy of note. Like I guess people sort of forget there is a lot of time for some people. There is a destination. The journey comes to a peak. Where you go, I'm happy, I'm successful, I've reached my goal, and that's really great to hear that someone in a business space. I mean, they own their own law firms. That's quite a crazy enterprise in itself. But that's really cool. They can take the time and say, look, I acknowledge this is where I want it to be. I don't need to grow to be happy.
One of the things that I focus on every day in my life, my personal life, my friends, Matt and Pat, when they come to our office, and you get to know me deeper and closer, you realize like I genuinely care for people. Like, if you're in my space, if you're in my life, if you're in my atmosphere, like we're sharing energy.
I felt that, man. We were at your office for like at least 2 hours, and I knew you were busy, man. But like you wanted to like give us the full experience, and we appreciated that.
100%, man. And so look, if we're sharing energy, right? If like my electrons are bouncing around, like we're just made up of atoms, right? One of the key things I do is I try and just share something that I've got like experienced that day with someone. And one of the key things I remember specifically when Matt and Pat came to our office that day, we talked about this concept of happiness, and you touched on the word happy. I think the biggest injustice that humanity has done is predicated happiness based on financial position, based on society's perception of achievement, based on a state, based on an emotion. Like this whole concept of a pursuit of happiness, you're not pursuing it. It's not a destination. You don't go on a journey to get to happiness. The journey in and of itself is happiness. It's a state. It's what your mental state is. It's your perspective. It's your zen. It's how you look at something. Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things, like, I'm very passionate about this topic, man. Like, I hope I haven't hijacked it.
No, it's wonderful. Very valuable.
I love it.
But there's so much talk of anxiety going on. And a lot of our athletes, a lot of our younger staff members and older staff members are having anxiety these days. Why? Why has it become so prevalent now? Is there all this external pressure? Is there all this self-judgment that's going on because your worthiness? You are perceiving your worthiness based on what you're interpreting and observing on social media. Yeah, you're judging yourself based on superficiality, and that's just wrong, man. That's just so flawed. I think it requires people like yourselves putting on this podcast and trying to definitely control the narrative, which is what you guys are doing. I'm super proud of, man. That's why definitely when Maddie reached out to me, man, I was truly honored to come on and just share.
No, thank you. I reached out to you last year before we had anyone. We just had Aaron on, and when you agreed to come on again, I was like, man, I look up to both of these guys so much, and Pat as well. Look up to yourself and Aaron. So I just say thank you.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you for the kind words, Maddie. I'm blushing again.
Isn't it incredible that you said that? It was like, I've noticed that a lot as well, because I got really quite interested in the adrenal space in the last, over the last few years, and I guess more so like the biochem behind the impacts of stress, more so where you ended up actually originally earlier in this piece, and I guess I used to think the king hormones were, testosterone or growth hormone. Being a younger bodybuilder myself, I always think those are the big kings, but it's not. It's really not. Stress,
cortisol, man. Cortisol, adrenaline
crushes everything. And it's
norepinephrine. You've got the whole combination.
That GABA and glutamate ratios, it's incredible to see. It's so much of a self-perpetuating cycle, and it's very easy to see how people can fall into those sort of those traps, I suppose. And even being aware of just being aware of being in the loop, I think in itself is important. But I don't think you do in the process. I'm guilty of it, where you'll get sidetracked in trying to get to a certain place, and you're almost searching for trying to be not comfortable, but you're trying to get to a place where where you've reached the next platform, and you think, if I get there, I'll be happy. And you get in that headspace, or when you're in business in particular, and you're doing it for years at a time, and it is a marathon, and you're looking for that place where you go, if I can just get here, I'll be satisfied, I'll be happy. And you get there, and then you go, oh, okay, what's next? And I think it probably ties in beautifully to what you said, that was never the actual place you're going to get the happiness from, right? A to B, that little space was possibly the thing that actually was going to motivate and give you any sort of sense of fulfillment from that, right?
I have the same happiness now that we did when we were fledgling startup. I have the same happiness now compared to when I used to drive a Toyota Echo with holes in the floor. They used to call me Fred Flintstone, because the car, you'd look down and you'd be able to see the road when you're driving the car. Same happiness, same ears, same level of passion, same intensity.
That's fascinating. It is, and I think if there were, going back though to yourself when you did start, if there was anything, would you? I'm going to preempt my guess what your answer might be, but would you, if going back, telling young Izhar what 7.5 years ago, is there anything you would have done differently? And I ask this because, once again, for our audience, who are people who are essentially only aspire to be at the level of success that you've sort of managed to procure in this industry, they're going to be going, okay, what are the fundamental steps? And they're going to look to people like yourself, and some of the guests we've been lucky enough to interview, and go, what's the blueprint? And so I guess if you now doing these years of, stacking these years of success on each other, going back to the start, if you had your time again, what would you tell younger self? Would you do things differently, or what game plan would you give yourself?
Yeah, that's a really good question, man. You can probably tell I'm the person of the mindset that just push harder, like always push harder. Like the same thing in the gym. Every set, every rep, every next session that I'm going to go and do, it's always about getting better. And then what I'll do is, after that, I'll look back and say, could I have gone harder? And that's the real drive. If I was talking in the old days, I'd say, you young motherfucker, you were so lazy back then, man. You know? You're so lazy. There's so much more shit you could have done. Come on, get up, but stop being lazy. Give him a kick in the ass and tell him to fucking work harder, create more product, take more risk, invest more, build a team faster. 100%, man. You know, I tell the same to my daughters. The reason I am how I am today, bro, is because my old man would constantly be telling me in the nicest way possible, not in the put you down kind of way. But I'd come, you know, I mentioned to you guys I wasn't really like my biggest gift was not being gifted at anything. Okay, that's my biggest gift. I just had to work fucking 10 times harder. But there were some things that did come easier to me. I was very athletic, so I could dunk from when I was 12 years old. You know, I was like 6 foot when I was like 12.
I'd use a milk crate.
Well,
but as a kid that can do those kinds of things, you have a level of arrogance, and it's every parent's responsibility or every mentor or coach's responsibility to bash that shit out, not physically, but through
Nurture.
through love, through being realistic, you know. And so he'd always put me against himself. You got to beat my record, you know. You got to beat my record. Oh, like if I happened to study really hard and come first in the exam, it's like I used to come first in the exam and we didn't even have fucking lights. We had a kerosene lamp. So look, I think the world's becoming soft. I think everyone's a pussy. You know, everyone is very, very treading on eggshells. People are sensitive. People have fucking little breakdowns because they're all about, let's up this. No, man. Like, you got to call a spade a spade. If something is shit, you say shit. Full stop. And if I look back, yeah, there are times when I was lazy. There are times when I partied too hard. There are times when I probably lost my temper a lot. And I would go from 0 to 100. I'm so calm.
We've all gone through that shit, man. We've all gone through that one.
You know, and maybe it's the area we grew up in Maddie.
Yeah.
You know, it's
I've seen some shit, and you would have seen some shit that we probably can't talk on here. So.
Yeah, and that's defined. That's made us who we are today, and
Yeah.
that's given us the gratitude to appreciate and be better human beings. But man, yeah, I'd tell that young is, you're young. The world's ahead of you.
But what's crazy is now the kids are way softer, or the generation now is way softer than it was when you were up and coming. You know, so like you said, a lot of people.
It's our fault. It's because
I'm not blaming them. I'm saying it probably does come back to us. Well, like I'm guilty of giving it to my son sometimes, like really easy. I'm like, oh shit, I shouldn't do that. But yeah.
Because we all are nostalgic and we all put ourselves back to when we were kids at that age, and it shouldn't be like that. We should be looking 10 years ahead, man. Always. It's all about the consequence. But look, man, yeah, I just tell myself go harder. Nothing's guaranteed. World can change. You know, we had a big deal with GNC that was set to launch in September, and they just filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. So yeah.
And mate, the GNC, so yeah, that whole scenario. My sales representative actually was actually of the ilk of Canadian GNC branches before, and he worked over in their head office before coming here to Australia. And yeah, it's quite a fascinating saga that in itself. That could be a podcast to itself. But I think that's a fascinating point, isn't it? The more you fit into a day, the more you wish you could tell younger you, look what you can do in a day. And but you're dead right. I do find that the resilience is sort of which makes, you know, I think the resilience is what really does it at the end of it. And I think that does very much take the person who, when you are becoming, if you're getting early glimpses of success and you're getting, you know, greedy or arrogant, or, you know, I think that humility is probably the theme that needs to run through it. There's no room for ego in business because it'll undo you. I think, and there's, I think you'll also very quickly lose your hunger in the bodybuilding space. You'll see it. People who are genetic freaks naturally don't have the hunger of the people who are, you know, are not so genetically gifted. If it's come easy to you, you very rarely strive at it with the intensity you require. So when you say, you know, I'm not gifted in any one particular thing, you have to work harder. Well, I think that's very much the case with business. We all tend to, you know, we tend to attack areas with ferocity that we lack in. Because if we didn't lack, we probably wouldn't have that drive to correct that. I would probably sort of posit. But I must admit, we've had you for an hour and it feels like all of 3 minutes. But I thank you so much for your time. I think we could.
He's got before we conclude. Izhar's got what was it? Izhar, you said 36 new products that are coming out.
58.
58. Sorry. How many? Can you share with us some juicy products that you can talk about and share with the viewers what you might be
any exciting things that we can look forward to in the future, mate?
Yeah. For sure, man. There's going to be an innovative pre-workout that's coming out in November this year. That's actually a collab with one of our athletes. I formulated it together with that person. The person went over to Salt Lake City with me and my family, and spent a couple of weeks in the lab with that person. It's one of the first pre-workouts to actually have 5 grams of EAAs in there based on clinical research that shows the delayed onset muscle soreness and reduction in lactic acid buildup with pre-workout consumption of essential amino acids 15 minutes prior to strenuous exercise exertion. So we've prefaced this on a whole bunch of cool shit. There's we've trademarked pentacene. So we've got 5 different sources of caffeine with all different half-lives releasing at different stages with 30 milligrams of synephrine at 30%, which is the ideal sweet spot that we found. A bunch of nootropics in there that just hits the spot, but a big fat serving. It's like a 18.5 gram serve. Gonna pack a punch, and I think historically EHP's been renowned, and we still are, for OxyShred and our prominence in the weight loss and fat loss space. We really want to cement our position in overall performance, whether that's in like anything, physical performance in the gym, weight loss, fat loss, recovery, everything. We want to be at that pinnacle of that, man. So I'm just trying to identify areas where we don't dominate in categories. And I told you, well, we're talking about, how does a brand sit down and engineer and strategize areas of growth? It's just, where are we weak? Where are we not? What do we have to do to continue the excitement? So that's going to be.
Izhar, what do you think? Just quickly, what do you think of the gaming space?
Wow, man,
It's huge. It's bigger than the fitness industry, man. It's massive.
Look, I understand, man. I'm fully with you. I have lots of friends in lots of successful areas. One of my most successful friends is in cybersecurity. He's my age, and he just bought a $7.5 million Pagani Huayra. He's the only guy who owns a Pagani in Australia.
What the heck is that?
look up Pagani Huayra after the podcast, and you'll know it's a sick car, by the way, hypercar. And I see opportunities everywhere. I see people who are successful everywhere. It doesn't mean that you need to necessarily go and pursue it. Will, you mentioned earlier on, I don't understand what journey you're on. Pave your path on that journey. We want to be respected. We want to be renowned for being leaders in the weight loss category and the performance space. That's what EHP is for. Empowered human potential. Our potential is limitless when we are empowered. The gaming, all good, all great, does not accord with my values and my ethos. I get people who game, I respect people who game, and I have no hate for that. When a brand like us comes out and encourages and pontificates and preaches physical activity, getting outside of your house, staying active, getting off your ass away from the screen, I'm sorry, man, my personal values do not accord and align with dropping a product that encourages that shit. So we're not going to do it. I'm telling you that now. That is a definite no from EHP. No,
I love that. I love that. You just doubled down. You answered a question I didn't even ask, which was, because I found some of the people who've done the most successful building of a brand ethos are people who have sort of, with no shame, doubled down in one area, and they know that they've, in doing so, they may risk losing a given market, i.e. gaming, for example. But by doubling down and crushing it in what they know they're good in, what they, their values stand for, they succeed in those areas tenfold. It's really interesting to see that, because you guys could, with the brand exposure and just sheer marketing exposure you guys have, you quite easily could walk into that space and drop a nootropic or what have you. But I like that. No. They're allowed to say no because it doesn't align with values, right? And then it goes back to what's the brand built on, and what will keep you going for another 10 years. And if it isn't in line, you will very quickly get a rude awakening. So I love hearing that from people who build brands, and they go and they double down, quite shamelessly in one area, and it's brilliant. That was a really, really good answer, and I'm glad that was how that conversation went. It's nice to hear a genuine drive behind a brand. That's really cool. So that's God, we put some value into this episode. I've been excited just listening to it. I almost haven't been able to think up questions as we've gone, because I'm just literally absorbed into what we're talking about. God, we're gonna have to get you on for a second episode, I think, mate, in the future. It's been a wonderful hour and a bit talking to you, mate.
Well, thank Izhar for his time. He was up at 5 a.m. today with his US team, by the way. So,
of course, yes. You're running multinational, mate. It's got to have some fun time zones to it, doesn't it? But it keeps you young.
We're pretty lucky now. The team spread throughout the world, but I was explaining this to Matt and Pat when they came and visited. We're the company that now. My job is to ensure that I support our senior leadership team. I'm their coach. I'm there to ensure they perform. I'm there to give them a hug. When they pull the muscle, whatever. There's just some changes happening in the US at the moment with the retail space. You guys know what's happening over there, and then e-com over in the US just quadrupling for us, and us having to work out ways of just strengthening that infrastructure. It's just things are happening all the time, man. So like I talked to you guys, I have no routine. there is nothing. And just at the moment, it's like a game of basketball, dude. You can have the best plans in the world, man, but the number one way of playing defense is man on man. Guard your player. Just adapt and overcome, mate. Well, look, what an amazing hour of just pure content gold. Thank you so much for your time, mate. I appreciate sharing quite a very personal and genuine backstory as well. So thank you very much for sharing with us. I appreciate your time, and I think that'll wrap up beautifully the Wot Supp podcast episode 12. So thank you very much to all of our listeners, and thank you very much, Izhar, for sharing some amazing insight there. So I think we'll call that one a wrap, guys. Thanks again, and thanks for listening.
Awesome.